Hello, my friend, and welcome to a journey you won't be able to look away from, because there's a woman, and if you've ever met her, you'll never forget her. She doesn't need to speak much to stay in your memory. She doesn't try to make you fall for her, and she doesn't have to stay to make you miss her. That is the Aries woman. Today, I won't tell you about her as a symbol, but as a presence, real, raw, and utterly irreplaceable. And if you've ever wondered why women like her make the whole world turn its head, let's begin with the first truth. It's not because she's too strong, it's because she never tried to shrink herself, just to fit into someone else's idea of enough. Not everyone comes into this world to learn how to shine. Some souls are born with light already running through their veins, as if the universe itself lit their fire in a past life, as if they are the living proof of a sacred promise that even in the darkest corners of this world, there will always be one flame that never goes out. The Aries woman is that flame. You can't see her for the first time without stopping, not because she tries to be noticed, but because her presence carries a frequency that slows down time. Everything feels one breath quieter, and suddenly you realize you've stepped into a space where the light doesn't come from bulbs, but from a heart that beats fiercely, fearlessly. She was different from the start. When the world told her to stay quiet, she asked why. When others walked with caution, she ran into the wind. She didn't learn how to lead. She was the leader, even before anyone knew they needed one. I once met an Aries woman, 39 years old, during a meditation retreat in Santa Fe. She walked into the room like she already belonged there, but her eyes were soft. She didn't speak much, but no one could look away, and when she finally spoke, it wasn't the words that stayed with me, it was the feeling that her fire was speaking directly to the fire inside of me. There's a kind of woman who doesn't wait for permission. She doesn't ask, is it okay if I show up as myself? She shows up, not out of pride, but because her soul doesn't know how to live any other way. An Aries woman walks into your life like an unannounced sunrise, and suddenly, you see things clearly, where you are, who you are, and how long it's been since you let your own fire burn. She doesn't sit around waiting to be chosen. She chooses herself every single day. No one taught her how to do that. No book, no course, because this instinct can't be taught. It's inherited from the soul, and if you're listening to this, if something in your heart is vibrating on a frequency you can't quite name, maybe you carry that fire too. Maybe it's just been too long since you let it burn. This society is used to women who are polite, soft, manageable, easy to shape. But Aries women, they're not here to fit in, they're here to expand the space. They're not here to follow the rules. They're here to burn the old ones down and rewrite the script. In their own light, some call it stubborn, some call it rebellious. I call it ancient wisdom, awakening. A soul that didn't come here to survive, but to lead. And in a world this noisy, this chaotic, a flame like hers is rare. So if you ever meet an Aries woman, know this. You're standing in front of a sacred fire, not one to possess, but one to learn from, to warm your hands by, and remember your own flame again. What makes her irreplaceable isn't her beauty or her confidence. It's this. She makes you remember who you were before the world made you forget. And when a woman can touch your soul like that, you don't replace her. You simply carry the gratitude that for one brief moment, you got to stand close. Because the most beautiful thing about a fire is not the light it gives off, but the way it wakes up the light that's been sleeping in others, and that is where the next door begins to open. Because when a woman lives like a flame, everything she gives is real. No pretending, no compromise, no need to polish anything for approval, just truth burning bright. In a world too familiar with polished emotions, polite masks, and perfectly timed pauses, she walks in like a summer breeze touching sunburned earth, bold, clear, and blazing. An Aries woman isn't someone you need to decode, not because she's simple, but because she's transparent. She lives as if every cell in her body is in full agreement with who she truly is. Every word she speaks, every move she makes, every glance she gives, carries a language no one ever taught her, the language of truth. I once met a woman like that, in a tiny cafe by Lake Michigan. The sky was full of clouds that day, but when she walked in, I remember so clearly, there was something in her eyes, in the way she sat down, ordered her drink with quiet certainty, that made the entire space feel brighter, without a single ray of sunlight. It wasn't because she was beautiful. It was because she was real. And that kind of real doesn't come from sharing all your wounds or wearing your past like a badge. It comes from peace, the kind you carry when you're done performing for the world. She doesn't try to please. She doesn't try to be cuter, softer, more feminine, or more acceptable. She doesn't ask for permission. She chooses honesty even when it makes others uncomfortable. An Aries woman doesn't fake happiness when she's hurting, but she also doesn't use pain to seek attention. She shows up in every shade of emotion she feels. One day she's strong. The next, she's soft, but every day she's herself. The world often mistakes sincerity for being harsh, but with Aries, that honesty somehow feels gentle. It makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, you're allowed to be real too. I've seen it happen. People who have mastered the art of holding it in, who hide their feelings like a second skin, find themselves spilling their truth after just a few minutes around her, because her eyes say, "I'm not judging you. I don't pretend, so you don't have to either." And strangely, that's what draws you in. She doesn't try to be magnetic, but you find yourself pulled toward her anyway, as if something deep inside you has been waiting to hear that whisper. It's okay to be real, not perfect, just real. She reminds you, you don't have to be like anyone else to be worthy of love. Your rawness, your scars, your shadows, your unfinished parts, they still deserve to be seen. They still deserve to be held. I've always believed authenticity is a quiet form of courage, and an Aries woman is that courage walking, not loud, not flashy, just a calm presence, built from years of refusing to compromise with what's fake. And the most beautiful thing about her, she doesn't make you feel small. She makes you want to return to yourself, because for the first time, you see yourself through the eyes of someone who lives without pretending, and you realize you were never meant to be anyone else. And then you wonder, if being real can feel this healing, what happens when someone not only lives their truth, but carries a fire that makes everyone else turn their heads? Not everyone can walk into a room and shift it just by being there, but some people don't need to say a single word to make you feel like you've finally been seen. And that feeling, you don't forget it, because it doesn't just lift your head, it makes you want to move toward that light. Soft, like a sigh in the middle of the night. Gentle, like the first beam of morning light slipping through a curtain. And yet, deep, like something in you that's been sleeping for years, now stirred awake. And from that awakening, a quiet question rises. What happens when a woman like that, with fire in her heart and truth in her soul, starts touching other souls without saying a word? Sometimes, someone walks into a room, they don't speak a word, yet everyone feels something shift, not because they try to be special, but because their presence reaches a place where words are no longer needed. A woman like that is Aries. She doesn't have to raise her voice to be heard. She doesn't need elaborate makeup to be noticed. Every step she takes is a message. Every breath she takes a declaration of life. She doesn't shout for a place. She just shows up, and somehow the world instinctively turns to look. I still remember a small gathering where an Aries woman sat quietly in the back. She didn't speak, didn't debate, didn't raise her hand, but when her eyes swept across the room, you felt your soul being called home. No pressure, no demand, just presence. Her presence didn't come from practiced speeches. It wasn't polished by performance. It came from full alignment, from living as one whole, unshaken self. She didn't need to do anything, just be herself, and that was enough to make others go silent and start listening to the deepest parts within themselves. In meditation, there's a saying, energy never lies, and Aries is the purest embodiment of that truth. She doesn't try to be liked. She doesn't force people to respect her. She simply enters the space with an open heart and a kind of unfiltered integrity that radiates without effort. Those who have spent too long pretending often feel exposed in her presence, because when real light shows up, shadows can't hide. But strangely, instead of feeling small, people feel lifted, because she doesn't use her presence to dominate. She offers it as an invitation to come home, not to her, but to the part of yourself you may have forgotten. She doesn't command the room, yet the room changes when she walks in. The sound softens, the colors deepen, the heartbeat in your chest feels louder, clearer. She doesn't need a stage. She is the stage, not because she craves the spotlight, but because her soul emits a kind of light that cannot be ignored. That light doesn't come from ego, it comes from truth, from fully accepting who she is and carrying that acceptance wherever she goes. What's admirable about the Aries woman is not how people notice her, but that she doesn't need to be noticed. And yet, their attention stays, transforms. becomes respect, because you realize this is someone you can sit beside in silence and still feel whole. In deep healing sessions, I often remind the lost that sometimes you don't have to do anything. Just stay present and life will know what to do. The Aries woman is living proof of that. She doesn't push, she doesn't rush. She just shows up, like a candle in a dark room, not rushing anyone, just patiently burning, until someone finally realizes they can glow too. And maybe what stays with you long after she's gone is not the words she spoke, but how you felt when she was near, seen, energized, touched by something you couldn't even name, because when presence alone can heal, you know, this woman did not come from shallow places. There's a kind of love that doesn't need roses or promises. Just being there at the right time is enough to restore someone's belief in goodness. And if someone can show up with that kind of warmth, then imagine what happens when she gives you her heart, not just her gaze, but her love, deep, real, on fire, the kind of love that makes even closed souls want to open again. Not everyone can love with their whole heart and still stay true to themselves, but an Aries woman, she does it effortlessly. She doesn't love just to have someone next to her. She loves because her soul needs a place to give, not in a soft, fragile way, but in a way that looks like light and fire. When an Aries woman loves, there's no hesitation, no testing the waters, no waiting for someone else to commit. She chooses, she dives in, she protects, she shows up like a warrior wrapped in armor made of loyalty, unshaken even when the winds change. To her, love is a soul contract. Once entered, it's all in or not at all. I once heard a man talk about the Aries woman he loved. He said, in the darkest days of his life, when everything felt broken, when even he couldn't see his own worth, she stayed. No judgment, no running, just presence, as if she could still see the light in him. Even when he was lost in his own shadow, loving a woman like that, it's not like walking into a fairy tale. It's like being thrown into battle, where you can no longer hide behind excuses. You have to be real with yourself because she's too real for you to pretend. An Aries woman doesn't need you to be perfect, but she needs you to be honest, to commit, to stand beside her, not only when the sun is shining, but when the storm rolls in. Because when she loves, she's the one who shields you from the wind, takes the hit for you, steps back when you need space, and still waits there without blame, without resentment. But don't mistake her loyalty for weakness. She won't carry a relationship that's already rotting. She won't beg for love. If you betray her, if you make her feel small, she'll walk away. No drama, no tears, no need to prove anything, just silence. And it's that silence that will hurt the most, because the space she leaves behind is the loudest goodbye you'll ever hear. There's something rare about an Aries woman. She loves like it's the last time she'll ever get to love. Every glance, every touch, every moment is full-hearted. She doesn't do half measures, not even in love. She doesn't follow trends. She loves like an ancient soul, carrying memories of all the times she's lost before. And when she chooses to believe again, she believes with every breath she hasn't even lived yet. Her love doesn't come from lack. It flows from a place of fullness, warmth, and power. In that space, you won't be swallowed. You'll rise. You'll see a version of yourself, more whole than ever, simply because you stood next to someone who was never afraid of shining too bright. And maybe that's why some hearts run away from her, not because she's wrong, but because they're not ready for something that real. But if you are, if you're brave enough to stay, you'll step into a love that has no room for games or masks or empty promises, only presence, only protection, only a hand that holds yours tight, even when you're falling. An Aries woman doesn't love with words. She loves with action, by remembering the little things, by being there when no one else is, by walking away when she's no longer being treated with kindness. Some kinds of love help you escape reality, but the love of an Aries, it makes you want to live in it fully, and maybe, just maybe, because she loves that deeply, when the pain comes, it still can't reach the part of her that's proud. She rises in silence, as if even the wounds soften. In the light she keeps just for herself, a light no one can take away. A scar turned into strength, a crack shining like a crown. There are people who, when they fall apart, want the whole world to know they're hurting. And then, there are people who say nothing. They quietly walk through the fire, not because they don't feel it, but because they choose to turn pain into light. A woman born under Aries is one of them. She doesn't flaunt her wounds to ask for pity. She doesn't wear her suffering just to be seen. What she's endured, you won't hear it in her words. You'll sense it in the quiet power behind her eyes, in the way she smiles, in how she stands tall in the face of life, like a tree that's been through storms and never once bowed to the wind. I once knew an Aries woman who lost everything in just 1 year: her job, a long-term relationship, and the home she had poured her heart into. People expected her to fall apart, to break down, or at least disappear for a while to recover. But she didn't do any of that. She chose to quietly be reborn. She packed that old room with her own 2 hands, closed each box of memories by herself, found a new place, started over, and on a crisp early autumn morning, she woke up, made herself a cup of tea, and wrote just 1 sentence in her journal: "I'm still here, and the fire in me has never gone out." You see, an Aries woman doesn't need to be saved, not because she's hardened, but because she knows this truth. Only when you walk through the fire with your own feet does the light truly belong to you. In meditation, there's a term for this: rebirth from within. It's not some miracle that falls from the sky. It's a quiet, soul-deep process where you touch the very edge of your pain, and from that place, you rise. No applause, no spotlight, just trust in yourself. She doesn't deny what's happened. She just refuses to let it define her. To her, pain isn't a reason to be bitter. It's soil where something more beautiful, more meaningful, can begin to grow. And the most magical part: her rebirth isn't hardened or loud. It's soft. It shines from the inside out. Sometimes it's just a look in her eyes, but in that glance, you'll feel the entire story. A story she doesn't tell, but one you can feel deep in your bones. She doesn't post long status updates. She doesn't play the victim, because somewhere deep inside, she carries this belief: I was born to lead, not to be led. And so she walks on, sometimes still bearing scars, but never hiding them. She's not proud of her pain, but she honors what she survived. It's a quiet kind of royalty, one that makes you want to bow your head in respect. Maybe what sets the Aries woman apart isn't that she never falls, but that every time she does, she turns that fall into something sacred, a personal ritual that transforms her into a greater version of herself. She is living proof that strength doesn't need armor, that resilience doesn't need to shout, that life can rise from the cracks, like light streaming through the broken seams of an old vase, making it more sacred than it ever was before. Some people rebuild their lives by forgetting the past, but not her. An Aries woman carries what she's lost, not to regret it, but to remind herself: I once burned, I once broke, and I once rose again. And maybe, only when you've walked barefoot through the ashes of your old self can you understand what true freedom means. Not the kind of freedom that comes from leaving everything behind, but the kind that comes from holding on to who you are, no matter how much the world tries to change you. It's that kind of freedom that keeps her whole, even in love. Because for her, freedom isn't just a preference, it's sacred. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to prove a thing, because the freedom of an Aries woman doesn't come from the outside world. It rises from a quiet place within her soul, a place where she once sat alone, in the aftermath of something broken, in the silence of rejection, on long afternoons that offered no answers. And from that stillness, she learned something sacred. She is still herself, even when there's no one left standing beside her. The Aries woman doesn't need someone to complete her life. She loves taking care of herself. She loves those quiet walks alone, those mornings in her favorite cafe, sipping coffee, writing in a journal no one else will ever read. Those moments don't make her feel empty. They make her feel whole. In love, she's not looking for someone to fill a void, because in her, there is no void. She simply chooses someone who can stand beside her without dimming her light, without clipping the wings. She just folded after a long flight home. She chooses freedom, not because she doesn't know how to love, but because she understands something deeper. Real love never asks you to lose yourself. She's seen too many people trade their freedom for the warmth of someone's arms and still feel alone within them. I remember a conversation with an Aries woman in Colorado. She said something I've carried with me ever since. I'd rather sleep alone with a peaceful heart than lie beside someone who makes my soul shrink just to survive. That wasn't pride, that was the wisdom of someone who faced loneliness and didn't let it swallow her. She doesn't need you to fix her. She needs you to understand that she's not broken. And if you love her like you would a mountain. Don't try to move her. Don't build fences around her. Just come quietly, sit at her feet, and make yourself small enough to truly listen. The Aries woman carries an elegant kind of independence. She doesn't shout, "I don't need a man," or "I'm fine on my own." She doesn't need to say it. The way she lives, the way she smiles, the way she chooses every day is already her answer. She's open to sharing her life with someone, but not to be rescued or protected. Only so that two souls, two lives, can walk a path together without either one shrinking themselves to fit inside the other's chest. If you try to hold her too tightly out of fear, you'll only suffocate her. But if you trust her enough to let go, to let her be exactly who she is, then when she comes back to you, it will be a free and sacred choice. And the kind of love that's born out of freedom is the kind that lasts. The Aries woman carries the spirit of the desert. You can't tame her. But if you learn how to walk beside her, you'll discover a kind of beauty no easy path could ever offer. Wildness, depth, and sacred stillness, like watching the sun rise after the longest night. She doesn't stay because she's afraid to lose you. She stays because beside you, she still gets to be herself. And once someone no longer fears being alone, they stop fearing loss altogether. Because when a person can stand on their own, with roots deep in the ground, the love they give isn't to fill a hole, it's to share the light they already carry inside. And when a woman like that opens her heart, not with logic, but with the raw, unfiltered current of her truest emotions, you'll feel something you've never felt before. Her energy, it won't make your heart tremble in fear. It will steady you even in front of truths you once tried to run from, because her truth may be fierce, may be soft, but it will always be the kind you can't look away from. Not everyone can handle the fire of a soul that lives all the way. Most people are used to keeping things moderate, measured, safe, restrained, especially when it comes to emotions. But an Aries woman, she's wired differently. She doesn't live to fit anyone's standard. She lives like every moment is a stage, with her heart in the spotlight and her emotions lighting up every beat. She loves fiercely, laughs without holding back, cries without shame. When she's angry, she doesn't suppress it. When she's joyful, she doesn't tone it down. But don't confuse that with being impulsive. Everything she feels is real, raw, undiluted. She doesn't ask for permission to feel. She gives herself full access to every layer of being, the light and the shadow, the joy and the ache. I once sat beside an Aries woman during a community circle in Portland. Within minutes, everyone went quiet just to listen to her speak. She didn't raise her voice, but the way she shared her story about her first love, through her eyes, her breath, her hands, it made everyone in the room feel like they were reliving something in their own hearts, because no one can express emotion like that unless they've actually lived like that, and no one can awaken sleeping parts of you unless they've dared to live wide open. Her intensity isn't destructive, it's resurrection. It's the kind of energy that doesn't allow you to stay halfway, not in love, not in presence. You can't love her with indifference. You can't walk with her while thinking, let's just see where this goes. She doesn't do maybe. And if you're unsure, she won't wait. Her fire is like winter sunlight. At first, it may make you squint, but once it touches your skin, you realize how cold you've been. She never loves with calculation. She loves like there's nothing to lose, and maybe that's exactly why you feel strangely safe around her, because deep down, you know what you're receiving is real. This world has grown comfortable with the neutral, with people who know how to hide, how to stay quiet, how to live just enough. But the Aries woman, she wasn't born for enough. She was born to live fully, boldly, honestly, and through that she awakens the part of you you've spent years teaching yourself to ignore. She doesn't need someone to tame her or turn her flame down. What she needs is someone steady enough to stand beside her. When the fire rises, someone who won't panic, won't try to put it out. Just stay. Because if you can do that, you'll witness something rare. She'll begin to melt the frozen parts of you, not through logic, but with the purest kind of feeling. An Aries woman is proof that presence can never be invisible. She doesn't play a side role in someone else's story. She writes her own. And when you step into her world, you're no longer just an audience. You become part of the journey. A vibrant, multi-layered, never-boring journey. Not everyone dares to live from their original emotions. But if you've ever stood close to a woman who does, you'll know this. Honesty doesn't make you weak. It gives you strength from within. And when a woman carries that kind of natural confidence, the kind that doesn't come from praise or approval, but from having met herself at the deepest place inside, that light can't be hidden. It makes the whole world stop and look, not because she demands attention, but because her energy whispers to the light inside everyone else, it's time to start living like this too. Her confidence didn't come from books, and it wasn't born out of empty affirmations. The confidence of an Aries woman is something she was born with, woven into every step she takes, every glance she gives, every breath she draws. She walks as if her heart were a compass that never loses direction. No hesitation, no second guessing, no need for approval. This woman doesn't need a stage to be applauded. She doesn't need to post her pain online to be comforted. Her very presence becomes the answer to questions the world is still asking. How do I stay true to myself without losing connection? How do I stay grounded without becoming cold? How do I live honestly without being a target of judgment? She's been misunderstood. She's been called arrogant, cold, even heartless, all because she refuses to shrink herself to fit someone else's idea of femininity. But time reveals the truth. Her confidence isn't arrogance, it's clarity paired with a strange kind of humility. I remember a moment working with a healing group in New Mexico. There was an Aries woman who quietly helped another member without ever seeking praise or showing off. When asked why she did it, she just smiled and said, "Because I knew I could. And if I know I can but choose not to, then I'm no longer myself." That answer stayed with me, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it carried a rare kind of steadiness. The kind of steadiness that doesn't need noise or spotlight or outside validation to give itself permission to exist. An Aries woman doesn't chase compliments. She doesn't wait for recognition before taking action. She moves because deep inside she already knows, "I am enough," even when no one says it out loud, and that belief is what allows her to walk through days when no one understands her without losing her compassion, to face rejection without turning bitter, to fall without ever doubting the value of what's still to come. Her confidence doesn't pressure others. Instead, it creates a kind of sacred space where you start to ask yourself, what part of me is still afraid of shining? Because when you stand in front of a woman who doesn't need permission to glow, you begin to realize you deserve to believe in yourself too. There is nothing more quietly powerful than someone who is confident and humble, not because they think they're better, but because they know who they are. And the Aries woman, she is living proof of that. She doesn't try to stand out, but somehow you remember her. She doesn't beg for support, but you want to walk beside her because something in her energy wakes up something in you, something raw, something real, something deeply alive. And once you felt that aliveness, you won't want to return to the numb version of yourself again. The strongest people aren't always the ones who talk loudly about their success. They're the ones who quietly live in alignment with their values every single day, even when no one claps, even when no one sees. And when that kind of woman walks into your life, what she leaves behind isn't just a sense of attraction. It's the undeniable feeling that something in you has just been awakened. Because if someone can carry that much confidence, not because they've never been hurt, but because they've learned how to stay true, even as the world around them crumbles, then they'll never forget one sacred thing: the way you made their heart tremble in a world full of noise, a world where, sometimes, the most sacred gift we can give each other is quiet, soulful presence. It's not easy to find someone who still listens with their whole heart. An Aries woman doesn't store your words in ordinary memory. She remembers with feeling, with energy, with how you made her feel, in moments when no one else was paying attention. She doesn't need expensive gifts, but she'll never forget the quiet moment you poured her another cup of tea without saying a word. She doesn't ask for grand promises, but if you've ever looked into her eyes, honestly, even just once, that look will live in her memory like a small candle glowing in the deep night. An Aries woman doesn't do halfway. When she's with you, she's truly with you, and because she shows up fully, she also feels deeply. She notices every subtle shift in your tone, every glance you try to avoid. She won't always ask, but she feels. I once saw an Aries woman refuse to go back to a past relationship, even as the man begged her through tears. When asked why, she quietly replied, "Because I still remember how he made me feel like I wasn't enough on a night no one else remembers. But my heart never forgot." She forgives easily, but she doesn't forget, not out of resentment, but because she honors what's real, both the beautiful and the painful. She doesn't sugarcoat the past just to make starting over easier. She doesn't paint it darker to justify leaving. She keeps everything whole in her heart, like a map of how she grew. Her loyalty isn't a duty, it's a soul-level choice. When she commits, it comes from the deepest place. She won't cling, but she doesn't let go easily either. Only when her trust has been torn apart will she quietly walk away, and once she walks away, you'll never meet the same version of her again, because once her heart breaks, it never pieces itself back into the shape it once was. No one taught her to love that loyally. No one forced her to hold on to what once mattered. But she lives as if sincerity is the most sacred thing in this world, as if true connection is a golden thread running through her life, and when even one strand breaks, she goes quiet for a long time. An Aries woman remembers the small things, a line you whispered when you thought she wasn't listening, a warm gesture you made without even noticing, a text message that arrived just when she was tired. To you, those things might have been nothing, but to her, they are living proof that kindness still exists in this world. She doesn't need you to prove your worth, but once you've stepped into the sacred space within her, you need to know you've left a mark, and that mark will stay longer than you think. What's more precious than a heart that still chooses loyalty even in a world that so easily forgets? What's more profound than a memory etched in feeling, not words? And if you've ever loved someone who lives that deeply, you've probably realized what truly connects two souls has never been the words we say. It's the feeling we leave in their heart when no one is watching, when no one remembers, when there's nothing left to hold onto but the quiet kindness you once offered with no agenda. And so, after everything, she still sits there with the same old cup of tea, the same old memories, and a loyalty that's never been stained. Loyal to the moments that were once true, because when someone lives that deeply, even the smallest moment, the one you thought meant nothing, becomes something she'll carry for the rest of her life. And that is where the real miracle begins, when she turns everything that ever touched her into light that shines on someone else. Not everyone has the power to make everything around them come alive just by being present, but for an Aries woman, it's almost instinctive. No need for a grand entrance, no need to take the spotlight. She simply shows up, and somehow the entire room begins to breathe a different rhythm. She doesn't try to be the center, yet somehow you feel like the space starts revolving around her truth and the radiant energy she carries. One look from her, and you might find yourself pausing, looking deeper into your own reflection. One short sentence, simple, stripped of any fluff, can touch the deepest part of your soul. I once saw an Aries woman quietly walk into a tense meeting. She didn't say much. She didn't push her way in, but with that peaceful, grounded presence, the whole atmosphere softened. No one told anyone to breathe, yet somehow everyone did. Her presence is like sunlight slipping through an old window, never invited, but when it comes, everything warms up. To her, every moment matters. An empty afternoon, a simple meal, a familiar road. She lives inside it fully, with all her feelings. She's not searching for the extraordinary. She lights up the ordinary, with a heart on fire and a soul that never hides. The Aries woman makes you notice what you used to overlook. A breeze, a morning cup of coffee, a question that seems casual. How are you really feeling today? But when she asks, you actually want to answer. No masks, no walls, because you know she won't laugh, she won't judge. She's simply there to be present with you. She never tries to make anyone remember her, but when she's gone, her absence feels like the empty space left. After a fire that once kept you warm all winter, you touch the silence and realize it's no longer gentle, and that's the most mysterious part. She doesn't teach you how to love, but somehow just by being near her, you start wanting to become a warmer person, a deeper one, a more real one. She brings out the good in you, the part you forgot. She reminds you of your first dreams, your earliest emotions, the days when you still believed you were worthy of love just as you are. She makes you want to slow down, to breathe easier, to live with more honesty. Not everyone can do that, but Aries can. Not with magic, not with effort, but with a presence so raw, so real, that no one can pretend in front of it. And one day, if you suddenly remember her, you might not recall exactly what she said, but you'll remember how it felt to be truly seen, to be deeply heard, to be yourself without needing permission. And maybe you'll smile because out of everything you've lived through, those ordinary moments with her were the ones that left a mark. This world chases after grand gestures, milestones that scream for attention. But some people, just by living quietly and truthfully, leave behind memories that never fade. And sometimes those people are the last light that stops you from giving up on yourself, because once you were seen, you were heard, you were touched, not by anything loud or flashy, but by the pure presence of a soul that chose to live fully, moment by moment, heart to heart, and maybe. The reason you never forget that Aries woman isn't just how she made you feel, but because she made you remember the best part of yourself, the part you had lost. But she just by being herself, brought back to life. Not everyone is meant to stay. Some people just pass through your life for a short while, but leave a mark that no one else could ever erase. An Aries woman is one of those people. She doesn't come to be admired or to be worshipped like some ideal. She comes to shine a light on the corners of your soul you've tried to ignore, to pull you back to the part of yourself you've forgotten, not with big lessons, not with grand speeches, but with the raw, fiery, and honest presence she carries. She doesn't try to change you, but once you've met her, you won't walk away the same, because the moment you've seen that fire in her eyes, the kind that says, "I've loved deeply, I've hurt honestly, and I've lived without pretending," you won't be able to keep living behind your own mask anymore. You'll start wondering, was there ever a fire like that in me too? I believe there was, and it was her. By refusing to ask for permission to be herself, who held up a mirror not to turn you into her, but to help you remember who you were before the world asked you to be someone else. She makes you want to be kinder but not weaker, stronger but not colder, more alive but not drowning in pain. She helps you understand the people who truly matter don't make you depend on them. They help you realize you can stand on your own and still be worthy of love. No need to act tough, no need to play a role, just be you. The real you, the one who can cry, the one who can laugh, the one who forgives, and still shines like the first sunrise of the world. Meeting her, it's like walking through a storm, and realizing the sky has never looked this clear. Not because she calmed the storm in you, but because she made you brave enough to walk through it yourself and finally see your own light. And once you've seen yourself that clearly, you'll never want to go back to who you were before. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey. Whether you are an Aries woman yourself, or someone who's once been touched by a fire like hers, I hope you never let go of the light you carry in your heart, because this world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more truth. It needs more fire. So I wish you this, the strength to live honestly, the love to stop asking for permission, and the light to never apologize for burning bright.